Hello, hi, welcome, how are you? Don't answer that. This is a video, not a phone call. My name is J.D. Evans, and I am going to read to you today. I'm going to be reading this book for you. So, who am I, and what am I doing, and why on earth am I insisting on reading to you? My name is J.D. Evans. I am an amateur author, and possibly the most amateur an author can be. I've published one glorious book, which has sold a glorious 43 copies. It's not this book. No, this is the book we're going to be reading today. The book that I published is this one here. We'll put that. We'll just put that aside just for now. And instead going to be reading this one to you. Why am I going to be reading Gillian St Kevern's The Well-Dressed Werewolf to you? Well, first of all, as an author, I have a love of books. And second of all, as a purportedly masculine white person over the age of 30, I've decided that it's time to record my opinions on things and then thrust them upon the internet. And the way that I've decided to do that is by reading some books. So what I'm going to be doing is reading the blurb and the first chapter of a bunch of books with a particular focus on authors from Aotearoa, New Zealand, as Gillian St Kevern is. Also a particular focus on indie authors as opposed to traditionally published authors. This is just because I feel like indie authors always need that little bit of an extra shove whenever they can, and there are some amazing indie authors out there that don't get the recognition they deserve, so hopefully I can help to propel a few of them. Gillian is certainly one of those. So, on to today. Today we're going to be reading The Well-Dressed Werewolf by Gillian St Kevern. And The Well-Dressed Werewolf, as we've got down the bottom here, is a gothic paranormal romance. And I have to admit to the audience straight away, a gothic paranormal romance, not actually my normal brand. I would not normally go for a romance at all. Gothic and paranormal, maybe, but yeah, romance, not so much. But I was pleasantly surprised. I have, in fact, read this entire book, and I can highly recommend it to you. It's a fantastic little romp, moves along quite quickly. It's not outrageously thick, and it's got a really cool story. And at the end of it, you'll be very satisfied, and at the same time, hoping that there was a sequel somewhere down the line, or even a TV series. So, first thing we'll do in each of these sessions is we'll have a look at the cover, we'll discuss the author a little bit, and then we'll read the blurb and then jump into the first chapter. As I said, Gillian St. Kevern has published a number of other books, including in this little sort of series, which I think is part of the Secretary and the Ghost series. I'm not 100% on that, but there are a bunch of very novelettes, novellas that Gillian has published in the kind of romance paranormal genre, and I'd recommend giving all of them a read. They're all a fantastic little light read. And then we'll head over to the back of the book. When the full moon is a black tie event. Full moon's obviously tying in with werewolves and tying in with black tie, which I think you'll all appreciate. I can't hear your applause when I tell jokes, but I can imagine it, so you don't need to worry about that. You don't need to send me audio recordings or anything. Felix Wood, valet, is determined to halt his employer's downward spiral. Just because he is a vicious beast 3 nights a month doesn't mean he can't be an impeccably dressed gentleman the rest of the month. Felix's commitment to duty convinces Westaway, a man of more wealth than sense, that's a common scenario, that Felix is the valet he and his large wardrobe deserve. There's just one problem. Felix already has a gentleman, and his presence may be the only thing between Robin and self-destruction. When a werewolf and his keeper are brutally murdered, Westaway and Felix must work together to prevent the society of lycanthropes and their keepers being ripped apart. But even as he risks his life to save Robin, Felix finds himself drawn closer and closer to Westaway. I added an extra closer there for dramatic effect, in an attraction that could destroy everything he values. Additionally, for dramatic effect, I mispronounced valet. But I'm sure you'll all appreciate the extra stage presence that gives. All right, heading on into the book. This is a signed copy because I'm a very important person. Obviously, I get signatures on all the copies of my books, especially when I buy them at events. To Ziggy, Otto, and Basil for sitting on me so I had no choice but to write, and bringing me a rat. Thanks. I'm not sure many of those things would assist me in the writing process, but then again, I am an amateur, and Gillian has certainly written an awful lot more than me. Chapter 1. The railway had come to Westport, and there were gaslights in the Wayfarer's Rest on the cliffs, but the only way to Morburn was by boat. Fishing boat, to be exact, the same wide-bottomed crafts the fishermen of Cornwall had employed for centuries. The winter breeze set a brisk pace, driving the little craft across the waves and threatening Felix's cap. Robin's brand-new bowler had blown off his head immediately after they'd set out. He held the damp hat on his knee. The wind whipped his cheeks into rosy freshness. With his hair in wind-swept disarray and his full lips pouting, he looked like a wayward youth and not a man on the brink of his 21st year, also known as a wayward youth on the brink of his 21st year. Felix's heart twisted at the sight of him. First, for joy that Robin existed and was his. Second, in unease at the trial that awaited them on Morburn, a trial neither of them knew anything about. Felix considered the fishermen. Strong, taciturn men. They'd said nothing beyond the minimum necessary to settle the price and time of departure. How much did they know of the island? Have you made many trips to Morburn recently? The younger man grunted, eliciting a glare from his wizened companion. He flinched, pulling his woolen hat down, and, as far as Felix could judge, busying himself unnecessarily to the sail. Felix addressed the older man. "What is Morburn like?" He removed his pipe, laboriously stuffing it with a roll of tobacco. "It be silent." He replaced his pipe. Conversation over. Robin chuckled. That told you. It was the first he'd laughed all day. Felix's mood lifted. He turned his face towards the craggy island rising out of the sea. Morburn, all sharp edges, crashing surf, and towering cliffs, was atmospheric rather than scenic. Still, Felix tasted the salt carried on the wind on his lips, and experienced a strange exhilaration. The wind grew fiercer as they neared the island. One hand holding his cap in place, Felix glimpsed a tower of some sort. He may have grimaced as well, we could never know. Felix glimpsed a tower of some sort, hewn from granite, but the encroaching cliffs, steep and stern, hid it from sight. Not the most welcoming place, but as the fishing boat shot past the cliffs, they discovered a perfect natural harbour, the sharp cliffs protecting the bay from the choppy waves and roving wind. Robin whistled. What a beauty! I can't whistle, so I won't be adding that to this particular venture. A yacht was moored in the harbour, a sleek white vessel tugging at its anchor and riding the swells with nonchalance. "Look at those lines!" "Ah," said the younger man with a surprising fervency, "that be Mr. Westaway's boat, that." "Mr. Westaway?" Felix stared at him. "The Mr. Westaway?" He realized how stupid the question was a moment later. Westaway was infamous in society, but this was as far from London gossip as it got. "It's gorgeous." Robin's gaze rested on the boat. The yacht looked entirely incongruous against the rugged backdrop of cliff and sea, a frivolity at odds with the practical design of the fishing boat. Ahead was the shore, the rock-lined beach only marginally more welcoming than the surrounding boulders. A rough-hewn path into the cliff led up to the island itself. A dinghy, painted to match the yacht, was drawn up on the rocky shore, 2 men unloading boxes from it. A third shaded his eyes to watch the fishing boat approach. Their boat ran onto the beach with the harsh sound of scraping rock. I can't make the harsh sound of scraping rock, so I can't add that to this particular venture. The younger fisherman jumped ashore to pull it up. Felix splashed after him to help. Once the boat was made firm on the rocks, Robin scrambled onto the shore. The older fisherman swung Robin's suitcase and Felix's boxes to Felix. The younger fisherman helped him with the trunk. Felix grunted thanks. How would he get the trunk up the steep path to the cliff top? The watching man stepped forward. He wore a lounge suit in utterly impractical cream, paired with a boater resting at a jaunty angle on his sandy hair. His beard was neatly trimmed, and his moustache frivolous. We've all seen a frivolous moustache once or twice. "Mr. Grosvenor, I take it? What luck, greeting the guest of honour before the host does. Lord Acton will be peeved." He held out his hand. "Julian Westaway, a pleasure." Robin returned the handshake. "Charmed, I'm sure. Is this gathering on my behalf?" Westaway raised his hand to his mouth, a gesture of dismay so overly theatrical it was as alien on the rugged shore as the man himself. "I can say no more. Look at me. You have not taken 2 steps, and here am I, about to ruin all Acton's fun." Felix picked up Robin's suitcase with a feeling of dismay. He'd packed for an ordeal, not a party. He mentally reviewed Robin's suits. Thank God he'd decided to pack the dinner suit. The travel suit would do for most occasions. "I'm sure he wouldn't mind," Robin said with a slightly breathless laugh. "I have to admit I'd love to know more about why we're here." He trailed off, looking at Westaway with a hopefulness impossible to resist. Westaway snorted. "And that, dear boy, is exactly what I cannot tell you." He turned his head, catching Felix in the act of staring at him. "And who is this?" There was a pause before Robin answered. "My man, Felix." He sounded puzzled. Felix couldn't blame him. To the well-bred person, servants were invisible. Westaway's frankly appraising gaze felt like a violation. He stared back, too shocked to look away. "Felix," Westaway stepped up to him, taking his hand. Despite being a slight man, his handshake was tight. Too tight. Felix forced a smile. The rich did not need to be polite. "Your servant, sir." Westaway leaned forward, and, so deliberately it could not but be on purpose, inhaled. "I will remember you." His nose was so close to Felix's throat, his breath tickled his skin. Felix froze. Was one of the richest men in Britain sniffing him? Westaway released Felix's hand, turning back to the men at the boat. "Be careful how you handle those boxes. That is aged whiskey. It doesn't deserve to be manhandled." Turning to Robin, he indicated the steep path. "It's a long climb to the house. Shall we?" Robin frowned at Felix. "You'll handle the bags, Felix." "Leave the trunk," Westaway spoke without turning around. "One of those house servants will fetch it." Felix turned from the trunk to Robin and cocked his head. Robin glanced at Westaway's back. "You heard, Mr. Westaway. Leave the trunk." He climbed after him. Felix made a face at Westaway's exquisitely attired back. Although relieved not to have to maneuver the trunk up the cliff, he could have done without the manner of it. Westaway's conduct was calculated to provoke. Gloating there about besting their host, teasing Robin with knowledge he could not have, and embarrassing him. Felix's lip curled. With Robin's case in one hand and his bag in the other, he began his ascent. His first sight of Morburn Keep was not reassuring. The remains of some ancient fortress, its grey stone was so worn by the wind it was impossible to say whether the building had originally been Saxon or even earlier. Later generations had extended the structure, but little could be done to make the expanse of Morburn, wide open and exposed to the sea winds, hospitable. A broad-shouldered bulldog of a man waited at the steps to the house, his black tailcoat buffeted by the breeze. His mouth pursed as Felix approached. "You are slow. Your master is already inside." Felix grimaced. Robin hadn't had to carry anything. "I beg your pardon." "It's not my pardon you'll have to beg." He drew a watch from his vest and glanced at it. "Come on." He led Felix around the corner to a side entrance. As they passed a window, Felix caught voices and the chink of glasses before the sound was swept away by the wind. "I'm Humber, butler to Lord Acton. While you and Mr. Grosvenor are here, you will obey every instruction I give you, no matter how odd. Do you understand?" "How odd are we talking?" Humber glared at him. "Flippant. That is a grave sign, Wood. A very grave sign." Felix pressed his lips together, suppressing a rejoinder. He could not afford to make enemies, not until he knew exactly what awaited them. Humber led him through a busy, if ancient, kitchen and into the servants' hall. It was a long, rectangular room with a solid table that ran most of its length. A thin figure stood as they approached, an older man in a clerical collar. "Wood, I am Barton. Put your bags on the table and we'll start." Felix placed both cases on the table. "Start, sir?" The cleric nodded encouragingly. "Show us the contents of your cases." About to refuse, Felix remembered the letter. "Do not be shocked at anything that happens. Rest assured there is reason for it, even if that reason is not immediately apparent." He would trust Carmichael. He opened his carpet bag, lifting out his nightshirt, shoe-cleaning kit, and collection of combs and brushes. "How's that?" "Come on. Everything," Humber said sharply. Felix winced, no avoiding it. He laid his pair of pistols on the table. "Now we're talking." Humber lifted the closest pistol and inspected it closely. "You keep your firearms in good order. You have a cleaning kit with you?" "Naturally." "Is this loaded?" "No." Humber handed it back to him. He took out his watch. "Load it." Felix sucked in a breath. "Surely—" "Do it, Wood." Both men stood watching. Well, it wasn't like there was any point hiding the bullets. Felix withdrew the cloth pouch from the inner pocket of his bag and removed powder and bullets. He loaded the bullets from the pistol's chamber and clamped it shut. "Just under 3 minutes." Humber shook his head. "Let's try his aim," Barton said mildly. "See the target at the end of the room, Wood? Show us what you can do." The room was dimly lit, but Felix could discern a dartboard attached to the wall at the far end of the room, surrounded by a peppering of marks. Somehow he didn't think they'd been caused by darts. "Fire? Inside?" "You need not worry about damage," Barton said. "Lord Acton himself has given his permission for the experiment." Felix followed. "I'm exhausted from the climb. I can barely keep my hands straight." "Even better," Humber said. "You won't always have the chance to collect yourself. Go on, Wood. Let's see if you have what it takes." Nothing got Felix like being dismissed. He raised his hand, locked his gaze on the target, and pressed down on the trigger. The pistol leapt in his hand, spewing smoke across the room. Barton darted over to the board. "Bullseye! The neatest shot I've seen in a long time." Humber grunted. "It is a light weapon. Do you have anything stronger with you?" What on earth had they gotten themselves into? A hunting rifle? But what is the meaning of this? The butler shook his head. "It is not yet the time for questions, Mr. Wood." He looked at Barton. "Do you have any experience with a crossbow?" "I know how to use one, yes." A nod passed between the two men. Barton moved toward the door. "I'll inform Lord Acton that you have the preparations in hand, and that so far Wood appears satisfactory." Humber nodded. "Pack," he ordered Felix. "I will show you to Mr. Grosvenor's room." Felix bundled his belongings haphazardly into his bag. "Aren't you going to time me?" Harrow narrowed his eyes. "It would behoove you to conduct yourself seriously. What happens, or doesn't happen, here tonight will determine the entire course of Mr. Grosvenor's life." Robin was in danger? What is going to happen to him? Humber shook his head. "It is better not to ask questions. You have everything? Then follow me." He said nothing more on the subject. And that is chapter 1 of The Well-Dressed Werewolf by Gillian St Kevern. I really like this book, as I said at the start. Not my usual genre. Romance, be it gothic, paranormal, or otherwise, is not something that I would generally go ahead and pick up off the shelf, just out of interest. But I really found myself pouring through this one, got through it in no time at all, didn't put it down pretty much. Yeah, just a really nice, light-paced story that I could, while I read it, I could actually imagine it being a little short TV series or something like that. You could almost pick the theme tune as you read it. Highly recommend it again. I'll post down in the description where you can get The Well-Dressed Werewolf. It's available online, and also where you can find Gillian St Kevern's details. Follow them on Facebook and on their other sites. All that will be down in the description once again. And thank you very much for listening. If you have any recommendations or requests for books that deserve a shout out, particularly if they're Aotearoa indie authors, but they don't have to be. If you just have a cool little author that you don't think gets enough recognition and you'd like them to have a reading done, I'd be more than happy to put them on the list. I do get permission from every author that I'm going to be reading um, before I publish a video, so this video won't go up without Gillian's permission, and no subsequent videos will go up without the author's permission as well. Um, so all of that has to be done first. But yes, if you have any recommendations, please post them in the comments. Tell me what you thought. What would you like? Would you like more of a focus on more chapters, more reading, less talking from me, all that sort of stuff? Pretty common piece of feedback that I receive, I have to say. And aside from all of that, the usual plug that you hear in every single YouTube video, liking and subscribing is massive for the channel. Please do so. If you like this video, give it a like. If you want to see more of it, subscribe. I'm not 100% sure what ringing the bell does, but hey, you know what? Do it. Just do it. Just ring that bell. And yeah, comment any recommendations down below. Thank you very much for listening. I've been JD Evans, and hopefully I'll be posting more of these videos soon.